Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu came out firmly against a tentative deal announced over the weekend between the United States and Iran. According to the agreement, Washington will release several $billion in frozen Iranian assets in exchange for 5 American prisoners. And ILTV Steve Leibovich reports.
Prime Minister Netanyahu said Israel opposes any deal with Iran that does not include the dismantlement of its nuclear program, arguing that the funds Tehran receives will be funneled to militias. Vacationing in the north, Netanyahu's statement said arrangements that do not dismantle Iran's nuclear infrastructure will not stop its nuclear program, but will provide funds to terrorist elements sponsored by Iran. The tentative agreement appears to be moving forward, and the American prisoners have already been moved to house arrest.
So this is a positive step, but I don't want to get ahead of its conclusion because there's more work to be done to actually bring them home. My belief is that this is the beginning of the end of their nightmare.
The date for the ultimate release of both the American prisoners and the unfreezing of the funds remains unclear, but U.S. and Iranian officials said they believe the agreement could be completed by mid to late September. The deal came together after months of indirect negotiations between the U.S. and Iranian officials. Details of the money transfer involved Qatar, which mediated the talks. The amount going from Seoul to Iran could be anywhere from $6 billion to $7 billion, depending on exchange rates. The cash represents money South Korea owed Iran, but had not yet paid for oil purchased before the Trump administration imposed sanctions in 2019. The U.S. maintains that once in Qatar, the money will be held in restricted accounts and will only be able to be used for humanitarian goods such as medicine and food.
Iran's own funds would be used and transferred to restricted accounts such that the monies can only be used for humanitarian purposes, which, as you know, is permitted under our sanctions. There's an exemption for humanitarian that's there from the start. We will continue to enforce all of our sanctions.
In a related development, Iran is reportedly slowing some nuclear enrichment, diluting some of its nearly weapons-grade stockpile. The Wall Street Journal says that Tehran has watered down some materials enriched to 60%.
Amid continuing speculation over potential Israeli-Saudi normalization, Riyadh named its first ambassador to the Palestinian Authority. The move is an apparent message to the Palestinians that they will not be harmed by the potential landmark deal between Israel and Saudi Arabia. And ILTV's William Sharon has more.
In a move that comes amid potential normalization with Israel, Saudi Arabia has named its first ambassador to Palestine. The Saudi ambassador to Jordan, El Saduri, takes an additional title and responsibilities. El Saduri will serve as the first non-resident ambassador extraordinary, what the Saudi foreign minister called the State of Palestine. He was also named Consul General in Jerusalem. Under U.S. auspice, Saudi Arabia and Israel are moving towards reaching a normalization agreement. The appointment of the ambassador is also seen as a message from the Saudis that a normalization agreement with Israel won't affect Riyadh's relations with the Palestinians. Palestinian officials in Ramallah had expressed concern over the possible deal between Israel and Saudi Arabia, saying they were being kept in the dark about the U.S. efforts to reach an agreement. The appointment of the Saudi ambassador followed discussions of potential Saudi-Israel normalizations between PA President Abbas and Jordan's King Abdallah. Abbas is due to be in Egypt to participate in a tripartite summit with President al-Sisi and King Abdallah.
Experience the power of truth with ILTV News. If you're looking for quality content and captivating visuals, join our news community and become an integral part of our team as we embark on a mission to unveil the real Israel, dismantling the web of lies and misinformation that surround reporting on Israel. By subscribing to ILTV News, you will not only have access to the latest updates, but you will also amplify our message, creating a ripple effect that carries the truth far and wide. Subscribe today and help reshape the narrative. Available on the web, Android, and Apple.
And now joining us is journalist and senior research fellow at the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs, Yoni Ben Menachem, on both Saudi normalization and the U.S.-Iran deal. Now, Yoni, let's start with Saudi Arabia. They're moving forward normalization with Israel, yet appoint a first-ever ambassador to Palestine. What's their game plan?
Well, there is no Palestine. They call it Palestine, but there's no Palestine actually. It's the PA, the Palestinian Authority. Of course, they will say Palestine, but I think this is a very dangerous development. I think that the Saudis are trying to give a signal to Israel, to United States, and to the Palestinians that they're not going to give up what they call the Palestinian rights for self-determination. And I think the Palestinian demand will come soon in the negotiations with the United States. And according to sources in the PA, there's a special promise from Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman to the head of the PA, Abu Mazen, that we will demand an Israeli commitment to establish an independent Palestinian state and also freezing all settlements.
Now we see, of course, the PA, the Saudi ambassador in the PA will also be the consul in Jerusalem, presumably to look after the mosques on Temple Mount. By this, do they actually deny Jerusalem as the capital of Israel?
Yes, but the Palestinian perspective and the Saudi perspective is that East Jerusalem is the capital of the so-called Palestinian state, and they want full sovereignty in all of East Jerusalem. And of course, on the Temple Mount, what they call Al-Aqsa Mosque, and they also consider the Wailing Wall, the Kotel, as part of the Al-Aqsa Mosque. So this is a very complicated matter, and I think we're seeing very negative signs now coming out of Saudi Arabia.
What are the comments coming from all sides, from Saudi Arabia, from the PA, from Israel about this?
Well, the Israelis, they want to put their heads in the sand and ignore what is coming out and saying no. So far in the negotiations with the Saudis, they didn't bring up any demand such as this thing for an independent Palestinian state. Of course, we will have to give something to the Palestinians, but freezing the settlements, for instance, is out of the question. An independent Palestinian state is a danger to Israel because it will be an Iranian state. And actually, they are playing as if it's a safe game. But I think that the Saudis are very smart, and they will, at the end of the negotiation, just before closing down the agreement, they will bring up the demands about the Palestinian issues, and this is going to be a very big problem.
And I'd like to turn to the Iran deal. The United States gets 5 prisoners, and Israel gets $7 or $8 billion in sanctions relief. Dangerous for Israel?
Very dangerous. I think that President Biden is doing everything to have some cards towards the presidential elections, because his policy in the Middle East was a big failure, and the Iranian nuclear deal was a big failure, and he's looking to some sort of achievements to present to the American people towards the elections. And this thing will be on Israel expense, because also on American expense. These funds that Biden is unfreezing, is releasing for the Iranians, they will go to the Revolutionary Guards. And what is the Revolutionary Guards? They are the long arm of terror, international terror, of Iran in the Middle East, all over the world, and this is very dangerous.
Yanin, do you think that the prisoner exchange is part of the large talks about Iran's nuclear program? Do we really know where that is at?
Well, the Americans deny that this is part of a bigger deal, but the Israelis are sure that President Biden didn't give up his dream to achieve a new nuclear deal with Iran just before the American elections. The Americans are denying, but who knows what to be in the future. I believe personally that this is a part of a bigger deal.
How much do you think they're really dealing with it, in their everyday plans in the United States? Is it something big? Is it something just, on the sidelines there?
Well, the plan is to have a temporary agreement with Iran on the nuclear issues, that the Iranians will not enrich uranium more than 60%, and in return, the Americans will release all the frozen funds of the Iranians. This has not been achieved yet, but this is the direction where things are going. Israel is very worried. Americans deny, but you cannot know what is happening behind the scenes.
Yoni, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.